All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Friday. Yeah, late start today. I was about to go live at noon, as I normally do on Fridays. Not always. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2, but normally yesterday was actually 3 when we had Vernon on, and I thought that was a good program. I'd urge you to watch yesterday's live stream, but unfortunately I can't. Well, I could tell you to watch it, but you wouldn't be able to, at least not yet. I'm going to try to get back online for you, but when I checked, because that's why I was late, because I was looking for yesterday's stream just to, going through my entire channel, and I thought, where's my Vernon video? And it wasn't there. And it turns out that YouTube had flagged it for violations of community standards. I have no idea why. I don't know what I did. Apparently they sent me an email. I couldn't find that email. I was looking for that email, trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm a little concerned right now, to be perfectly honest with you, about the viability, the long-term situation with respect to this particular channel. Everything's still there as far as I can tell, and I should be going out live right now. I believe I am. There may have been just one specific issue with yesterday's stream, and if so, we'll try to correct it. I have the actual video in formatted on my hard drive, so I can upload it, and if I have to delete part of it, I will do that. But I'm actually more concerned about all my other videos, which I am storing mostly, although not exclusively, at YouTube. So if I lose this channel, obviously I've got a problem. That's what I'm really concerned about. Let's get to the topics, though. And just so you know, again, this is my last program until July 2nd, which is a Tuesday, a week from Tuesday. I'll be away next week, actually taking a break. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'll try to upload a few videos while I'm away, but if I can't do that, I won't. What I generally, so obviously if I can, I won't. We'll try to get it for you. I'd like to talk to you today. It is the free-for-all 240, area code 242-5646. And this is, I called it FAUXGRESSIVES 2. It is the free-for-all, but I'm going to revisit some of the criticisms I've lodged against progressive hosts or so-called progressive hosts in the past and others. In today's program, I will talk a little bit again about KULINSKI. I challenged the claim that he had endorsed by Jill Stein, who is a Green Party candidate for president. This is probably going to be the Green Party candidate. I think it's been by acclamation, although she could be challenged, but we'll assume it is Stein. She said that he had endorsed her, as had Crystal Ball. I couldn't find evidence of that, so I call them FAUXGRESSIVES because I don't think they really did endorse Stein. We'll revisit that question. We'll also talk a little bit more about the Green Party and some of the challenges they're facing. I also want to talk about David PAKMAN. What I generally do, what I'm going to do today, what I normally do is I'm going to focus on, I'm going to center those who I think are the real victims right now in the world, those who are suffering the most. There are a lot of victims, right? I don't want to diminish or, other people who are struggling, homeless, hungry. It's awful. And there's nothing okay about it. But right now, probably the worst place on earth to be is Gaza as a direct result of the genocide by Israel there that we are supporting. And this is continuing unabated. There really has been no let-up. Israel is merciless. It is remorseless. It is just killing. It is a killing machine. And I don't mean that in anything but the most awful criminal sense. The Israeli military, the Israeli government has turned into a civilian killing machine. This is from Reuters today. Israeli bombardment kills dozens across Gaza amid fierce fighting. Apparently, some Israeli soldiers were also killed, and I'm sorry about that. I mean, look, I want Gaza to be free. I want it to be safe. I want it to be secure. I want the occupiers driven out. So if there are casualties, I'd certainly far prefer it to be the Israeli soldiers rather than Gazan civilians, or even, frankly, at this point, Hamas militants, even if some of them were at least in part responsible for October 7. As awful as that was, right now, Israel has abandoned any claim to humanity, to decency. They're just murderous. and I want it stopped. So better if, and they're the only ones who can stop it. Well, that's not true. Joe Biden could stop it. He has chosen not to. So this is a horrible, horrible thing we're seeing. It is, without question, genocide. From Reuters, this is also more from today's article, 38 more Gazans killed. And you see the at least. That's because, as we know from Fox News and other sources, we cannot be we cannot be confident in the numbers provided by the Gazan Health Ministry, often called by those who want to, I guess, call into question its credibility, to diminish it so that we won't believe them. They refer to them as Hamas. The fact is that whatever you call the Palestinian Health Ministry, it has repeatedly been shown by multiple sources to be reliable, to be credible. The death numbers, not just in this war on Gaza by Israel, but in previous situations where Israel has taken action against Palestinians, the numbers that the Palestinian Health Ministry has provided have been consistently accurate. So another 38 dead or more in Gaza just in the past 24 hours. Absolutely horrendous, absolutely horrific. I mentioned Kulinski. I'm going to start with a different host. I don't believe I've ever talked about this guy, and it's not because I like him. I don't. It's not because I don't like him. I mean, I guess I don't, but he's not someone who I find particularly horrific. But I wanted to just address the question of David Pakman, I guess, and his credibility. When I was in Monterey towards the end of the run there in the early 2013, maybe 2014, there was this new generation of folks who were broadcasting not necessarily on radio. Pakman was one of those. Also, Sam Cedar, who I think got his start on Air America with was it with Rachel Maddow? I don't think so. It was with Janine Garofalo, I believe. And then Maddow had her own show. Maybe she was on with Cedar. I don't think so. I think she had her own show. My memory is not perfect. And maybe there were times when Cedar was on with Maddow. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure Maddow did it with, or rather, Garofalo and Cedar were the team. And then that went belly up. That was a failure. And then Cedar started doing, I guess, internet and maybe some radio if he could get syndicated. Same with Pakman. And maybe it would have been better for me at that point to immediately go into some type of internet broadcasting. I didn't. It is what it is. This is what happened. Let me play this clip from Pakman where I really call into question his progressivism. And it's not just because of his pro-Israel, anti-Palestine stance, although that's a huge part of it. It's the way he presents it that I think is ultimately, anti-people, anti-human, and therefore not progressive.
To the extent that the protests don't violate specific campus rules, the protesters should be allowed to protest. That's my...
All right, so he's obviously talking about the pro-Palestine protests that, swept the country. This is from a month or two ago. He got a caller who was pushing back and saying, they were talking about the college protests. But Pakman has been consistently pro-Israel, if you want to call that, consistently Zionist. And you'll hear it right here. I think this is reprehensible. I think you should not, do whatever you want. I stopped subscribing to Jimmy Dore because of his climate crisis skepticism, if you want to call it, because he's presenting pro-oil and gas company, pro-oil and gas interest propaganda. I don't think Pakman's quite that bad with respect to Israel as Dore is there, but Dore in other areas is really, really strong, where he takes on the Democratic Party. We don't see that from PAKMAN.
View. I disagree with the vast majority of them, right? When you ask them their views on the specifics and you say, well, from which river to what sea should it be Palestine?
All right, so he's saying he doesn't agree with the protesters because, like, if you ask him a question, from what river to what sea should it be Palestine? And I'll continue. That's an absolutely absurd take, totally misguided, wrong-headed. Let's just play a little more from PAKMAN. Just 10 more seconds here.
Their answer, if they have one, I disagree with. Like, I think Israel gets to exist. I think it's a country. I don't think saying there should be, but they have the right to do it. Now,
all right, so you could say that's big of PAKMAN. They have the right to protest. Thank you so much. He's going to put limits on it. There are areas where he doesn't like the way the protesters acted, I guess, maybe preventing some people from going into their encampments. He talks about the occupation of a building in Columbia, at Columbia University, which he had a problem with. And, you know, I understand you can cherry pick certain actions by some of the protesters and say they were wrong-headed there. I don't do that. I think that ultimately you have to look at the cause, right? And this cause is so just, so righteous. Or let me put it a different way. They're standing up against just pure evil. I don't think you have to be so righteous to just say genocide is wrong. I don't think you have to be so righteous to simply say what Israel has done for the past 75 years with respect to the Palestinians who live in that region is just simply wrong and it must stop. And we should not be supporting it. We should not be on the side of the killing machine that is the Israeli military. But, you know, it's so self-evident, it's so obvious but because it's in the end a crime against humanity that these protesters right now, and I mean, I'm not talking about what happened 40 years ago, 50, I'm talking about right now what Israel is doing in Gaza is a crime against humanity. And so to kind of cherry pick the occupation of a building in Columbia in protest of our support is so, I don't understand that. You've completely missed what's going on here. The cause is so important. It is so essential that we do what we can to stop this evil, much as it would be you do what you can to stop the Holocaust in the 1940s. You do what you can to stop the transatlantic slave trade in the 16, 17, 1800s. You do what you can. And the protesters on college campuses are doing what they can to stop their institutions and our nation's complicity in that genocide. So PAKMAN's picayune disagreements with what some of the protesters are doing is completely wrong. But he also says something that really beyond me, because I get what you can say. Well, look, other people at the campus, they want to get to class. You're stopping them from getting to class. Other people may want to use a building. You're keeping them from using that building. That's a problem. All right. I think, again, you got to look at the bigger, the broader, the more important picture, which is we're trying to stop genocide. But okay, there are competing interests. I get that. But for him to say, well, when you talk to the protesters and you ask them, well, what is from the river to the sea, and what river, what sea? It's not really hard. It's the Jordan River. I drew a straight line there from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. It's obviously the river doesn't go straight like that. It's not a canal, but it wends and winds. But that's the river. It is the Jordan River. Everyone knows that's the river. There's even a song, the Jordan River is deep and wide. Right? Michael wrote a short river. Jordan is deep and wide. Lots, milk and honey on the other side. People know what that means. And the sea, I think it's obvious from the picture, but I drew it in there for PAKMAN. Yes, that's the Mediterranean Sea. And it's from the river to the sea because you can see those West Bank settlements. The West Bank, west, if you look at a map, north is up, south is down. West is to the left. Like if you look at the United States, California is on the left side. If you're looking at a map, New York is on the right. So west is west of the Jordan River, West Bank settlements. Israel is encroaching on an area that was regardless of whether you are okay with the partition in 1947 and the creation of Israel and the subsequent exclusion of many Palestinians from that area, even if you are good with that, and I used to be good with it, but now I'm not good with it, but even if I were good with it, still, I would say, well, Israel shouldn't be going into the West Bank with all those settlements, right? They shouldn't be pushing all those Palestinians who already, many of them had previously lived in what is considered Israel proper, closer to the sea, to the left as you look at that image. But even if I'm okay with the fact that many of those Palestinians are actually not where their families had lived for generations, but now are living in the West Bank, where maybe it's grandparents, parents, kids, great-grandparents, whatever, Israel is now pushing them out too. And the Gaza Strip, which you can actually see in this map, which I put together, sort of the bottom left, south left along the sea, is also where the Palestinians are, and also where they're being eradicated now, being wiped out. So for PAKMAN to say, I don't even think they know what they're talking about, there's the river to the sea, it doesn't take any real rocket science to understand. And for him to say, well, I think the state of Israel gets to exist, so what you're saying is you don't think it should be free. That's ultimately what you're saying. When you say, and I hear this all the time from Zionists, I think the state of Israel should exist. What they're saying is, and this is not some sort of like I'm misrepresenting. What they mean by the state of Israel, they mean a Jewish state. That's what Israel is called, the Jewish state. And I don't care what you call it. What I say is everyone there needs to be equal. Politically equal with economic justice. Now, economic equality, I don't think you can't have it. But what I do support is everyone has enough, no one has too much. Everyone has health care. Everyone has a place to live, a secure home. Israel has an absolute obligation, a moral obligation to take care of the Palestinian people that it has dislocated, it has moved, it has shoved aside. And the beneficiaries of that, the mostly Ashkenazi Jewish people who came to Israel in the wake of the Holocaust, who themselves were terrible victims, they need to figure out some way to have a relatively equitable distribution of land, of resources, of wealth, where everyone has enough and no one has too much, and everyone has equal political power. But the current situation where the Palestinians are third-class citizens at best, where they have to go through all kinds of checkpoints, they don't have freedom of movement, they have to present identity cards here, there, and everywhere, where they're periodically rousted out by the police. Their homeland, now what is their, I guess, homeland on the West Bank, is being encroached upon. They're not being protected. That's not freedom. That's not freedom. And clearly, PAKMAN doesn't support freedom for the Palestinian people. He is therefore not a progressive. You cannot be a progressive. Now, I know there are those, such as our friends over at the, and I use the term friends loosely, but our friends over at the, what do we want to call it? The ADL, right? Which is no longer considered credible. According to Wikipedia, at a minimum, they are a propaganda outfit. They're akin to the National Enquirer or the, Occupy Democrats, I believe. They're not credible. So you cannot take their word on Israel. You cannot take their word on what anti-Semitism is, even though they're the foremost proponent, that is the Anti-Defamation League, of the view that anti-Semitism is rising. This is a terrible problem. Jews are in danger everywhere. One of their tropes, or one of their arguments, it's not really a trope, their argument is that the slogan from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is anti-Semitic. Now, I only can see that being anti-Semitic if you believe that, well, I don't even know how it could be anti-Semitic. I don't understand. The argument is that a Jewish state, if you don't support a Jewish state, right? If you don't support an overtly theocratic religious state, therefore, ergo, you would be an anti-Semite. That's the argument. Well, I reject it. And I'm not the only one who rejects it. Also rejecting that is Wikipedia. And that's why they're no longer credible. That's why they're no longer cited as a reliable source, and no longer is their information given any kind of imprimatur of reliability. But David Pakman, I guess, still buys it. All right, Pakman is not my only progressive, in quotes, because I don't really think he's a progressive. But I want a guy who I have really had a lot more respect for in the past. I never really was much of a Pakman guy, and he's very snarky. I don't think you learn a lot from him. There's a lot of information there from Pakman. But Kyle Kulinski is somebody that I do in the past, at least. I have in the past, at least, had some, real, is it respect? Something like that, I guess, is the right word. Respect for him, thinking this was a guy who, well, more than respect. I want to, look, to be very, real, like, admiration, not just respect. I mean, he put together, was it Justice Democrats? He was the one who got AOC to run. He had this whole idea of let's occupy the Democratic Party. Let's infiltrate it. Let's move it to the left. And in the end, it hasn't worked out. I think he would be one of those to acknowledge it. But it was a brilliant idea. He deserves an incredible amount. Not every idea works out. And I think there were some scares put in the Democratic Party. I think that, a big part of the problem is that the hope was that people like AOC, Ayanna Pressley, all of them were going to be more diehards, right? They were going to really be ultimately pro-people, non-partisan or less partisan when it comes to political parties, and really focus on policy. And they kind of did for a little bit, but then they stopped. But I give Kulinski a tremendous amount of credit. I admire this guy for what he did. So I don't want to soft soap it or soft sell it. He accomplished an awful lot. He did some really good stuff. But, in the end, what have you done for me lately? And Crystal, I don't know, a year ago came out and said you have to back Biden. He's just too good, and Trump is just too evil. There's too much of a difference between the two for you not to support Joe Biden. I completely disagreed with that. And I was pleased, and to give Kulinski credit, he has taken on Biden for his pro-genocide policies in Gaza. But what he never did, at least as far as I can tell, is endorse Jill Stein, even though the Stein campaign claims he did endorse them. And a lot of other people, I know Sabby Sabs was talking about this, but she was accepting the narrative that Kulinski was, in fact, now a Stein supporter. So I'm going to play this one more time, because you can tell me if you agree or disagree. 240-242-5646. Here we go.
So from where I'm sitting, from my perspective, there's one candidate in this race that's doing the right thing and standing on the right issues. And, look, fighting for it at a time that's important historically, where nobody else is stepping up and doing the right thing. And so, again, very happy birthday to Jill Stein. Sorry I couldn't be there with you guys today. But I'm there with you in spirit. And, Jill, we wish the best for you moving forward.
All right. So I'm sorry. I don't hear an endorsement. I know he said one candidate doing the right thing, but he said that in the past. He said that when he endorsed Biden with Crystal. He said, yeah, on the balance, I prefer Stein. I might even vote for New York. But that's because Biden's going to win New York, and he won't have an opportunity to vote for Stein or unless he writes her in. We'll talk about that a little bit later. He did not say vote for Jill Stein. He at no point said that. He at no point said, I endorse Jill Stein for president. And you could see he was trying to go just up to that line without crossing it. So I give him credit for talking nicely about Jill, and I think, that's better than nothing. But that ain't no endorsement. And just to clarify, just to put that nail, in, to confirm that there's just simply no endorsement, even when he appears to be, even when Kulinski appears to be challenging Biden and really taking him on, he doesn't. He soft pedals the message. By the way, before I play another clip here, 242-5646, would love to hear from you. But also, don't forget, click subscribe. Want to see, I lost a subscriber. Not sure, maybe yesterday's program. Somebody complained about it. I'm not sure what happened. If you have any idea, if you watched it live, if you have any idea what was said that was offensive, that violated YouTube's community standards, I would really like to know, because I just don't. And I was really upset to find that they had taken off my video with Vernon. And I will put it back up at some point if I can find out what the problem is. I don't want to just post it back. I do have it. And maybe this means I've got to go start using my website more. But this is the only way I can really get any kind of traction is through YouTube. So I don't want to be, this is my source or my site. I'll definitely replay or upload really the video with Vern, but I only want to do that when I know it's not going to get taken down again, because otherwise I figure YouTube will go after me for abusive process or something. All right, here's Kulinski. Let's hear whether he really does support Jill Stein for president and whether he's really progressive.
Look, we're dealing in this election with human beings in this country, and human beings have eyes, they have ears, they make judgments. We're not perfect robots that only analyze policy, and that's the end of what we do. I kind of wish that's...
All right, so he's saying, why can't we just focus on policy? This is in response to some criticism by CNN of Fox and other right-wing media outlets and MSNBC, CNN and MSNBC taking on Fox and other conservative media outlets for showing videos of Joe Biden looking confused, Joe Biden seeming to be, not on the same page with everyone else, having senior moments, and according to CNN and MSNBC, selectively editing video to make Biden look more demented than he may well be. And Kulinski is saying, no, stop it, liberal media. Biden is demented. Biden is old. Biden isn't a great candidate for that reason. I wish, he said, I wish people would just base their vote on policy, right? Because he's saying Biden's policies aren't bad. I like Biden's policies pretty much. And you'll hear him explain where he doesn't. But pretty much I'm with Biden. It's just he is really, really old. So here's Kulinski on that issue.
How we were, right? But we're not. And so there are some big strikes against both. The strikes against Trump are obvious. Overturned Roe versus Wade, viewed as an extremist, tried to overthrow the 2020 election, convicted criminal, all that. The strikes against Biden are old as fucking shit, and everybody can see it no matter how much you try to cope and seethe and override it.
All right, so he says the major strike, and I don't curse, I don't use obscenities, I wish Kulinski didn't do that. This is from a YouTube video, so I presume it's not violating any community standards, and I didn't, want to delete it. But Kulinski, I didn't want to edit that, but Kulinski is saying the main reason, the big strike against Joe Biden is he's old. And he said, I wish people weren't judging Biden based on his age. Remember, he said, I wish they would just be robots and vote based on policy. I kind of feel the same way. I think policy is 99% of the time. But I don't think the main strike being that my problem with Biden is that I vote based on policy, and I urge everyone else to, the strike ain't age. I mean, it's not like it's good. I wish he were younger. I wish he were more vibrant. Those are all real issues. True. But the big reason not to support Joe Biden, in my opinion, is clearly policies. Not policy, policies. Now, Trump has bad policies also. So there's another choice. So far he hasn't mentioned her. It's funny because this is a guy who endorses, according to Jill Stein, he endorsed her. So you'd think he'd be talking about her, right? Because he's talking about who you should vote for and who you should support and why the media is getting it wrong. So why isn't he talking about how Jill Stein isn't getting any support, any media attention? Because he didn't endorse her.
Don't look, guys. Let me fact check you. Fact check. He's not old. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's that and it's Gaza for Biden.
So he says the two issues, right? The two problems with Biden are old and Gaza. Anything else?
So anyway, Jesus.
No.
This is the most insufferable MSNBC show in the world. This is like the heart of hack.
So I played a little bit more because I wanted it to all be in context. Because I was also thinking, because the only two reasons that Kulinski is saying maybe you don't want to vote for Joe Biden is he's old and Gaza. Those are the only two. This is a guy who says, hey, policy is what counts. And yeah, I don't like him on Gaza, but, he's not an insurrectionist and he's not a convict and, whatever else Trump has done wrong, Biden's not as bad. That's a really odd take for somebody who's endorsed Jill Stein to take, isn't it? Isn't that odd? You'd think if he really supported Jill Stein, he would be talking about a lot more issues than just Gaza when it comes to Joe Biden, especially because there are so many other issues that you can talk about when it comes to Joe Biden. It's not just Gaza and age. It's everything. It's healthcare. He made it clear he was going to veto. Remember, even before he became president, Joe Biden said, I'm not going to support Medicare for all. He wouldn't say whether he'd veto it. He said he was going to support a $15 minimum wage. He didn't. I think the biggest issue for me, besides Gaza, besides genocide, which is, there's two. And this was another huge thing because foreign policy, if you're thinking about Gaza, what about Ukraine? Endless war. Just signed a 10-year pact with Ukraine, committing us to 10 more years of supporting bloodshed, carnage in Eastern Europe. That's a Joe Biden policy. That's worse than Trump, for sure. And yet, the only policy that Kyle Kulinski, the ostensible Jill Stein endorser, can take on when it comes to Biden, the only thing he says is Gaza. What about, I've been talking about the climate catastrophe for well over a decade, right? I mean, this is something that you can go to halginsberg.com and you will see my, interest and my concern at what humans are doing to the planet. Joe Biden apparently doesn't have that concern. And we can, 2024 is the hottest year ever, after 2023 being the hottest year ever, or at least a recorded year. Well, I mean, you can go back 500 million years. But, some scientists are saying you might have to go back to 60 million years to find temperatures like this. And certainly the kind of accelerated rise in temperatures. And right now, it's just unbearable in much of this country. Joe Biden has just simply failed to take on this crisis, to address it. We now, as a nation, produce more crude oil. Well, there's the chart. U.S. produces more crude oil than any country ever. If we're taking seriously the idea of a global climate cataclysm, which is what is happening without any question, how could you possibly support Joe Biden for president, a guy who, under his watch, has overseen more crude oil production than any country ever has done? And the argument is, well, he doesn't really get, these are based on just, approvals from 10 years ago, and it also because of the Ukraine war. If you look at those charts, we were right there. There was a decline in 2020, the COVID year, and 21 it was flat and starts going up again under Biden because blue is the bar. And he almost passed Trump's record of 29 in 2019, and then did pass it in 23. So the idea that this is somehow a problem that predates the president doesn't have a lot to say, is ridiculous. The Department of the Interior under Biden has approved more permits than even under Trump. And even if you say, well, there's all these court rulings, it's really tough for the department, the president can't really stop them from doing this, and they have to follow the law, blah, blah, blah. If you want to make all those excuses, which I reject, the president can nominate and appoint people to the Department of the Interior who are going to simply reject permits to drill. But even if you somehow want to give him even that benefit of that doubt, how about the Willow Creek project, the carbon bomb in Alaska that Biden approved? How about that Mountain Valley Pipeline that the court said, no, we're not going to allow the fracked oil and gas to be piped through West Virginia and Virginia. The court said that. The court said that the pipeline company had not adequately complied with the requirements, the environmental protection requirements. Court said that repeatedly. Biden overruled them. He said, hey, we're going forward with that project in the deficit standoff. Well, we'll get the Republicans to sign off on raising the debt ceiling if we just tell them, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and open up. We'll make sure that pipeline goes through West Virginia. It wasn't even necessary. There were Republicans who didn't even like that idea. There were plenty of other ways to get the debt ceiling lifted. And if you couldn't get it lifted, then you don't get it lifted. Then you do other things. Then you raise taxes on the wealthy so the debt ceiling isn't reached. You slash the Pentagon budget. There are lots of things Joe Biden could have done, but he did the worst, which is greenlight the Mountain Valley pipeline. But Kyle Kulinski can only find one policy issue where he differs with Joe Biden, and that is Gaza. So, no, he's not progressive. He's faux-aggressive. The candidate he supports, ostensibly, but doesn't really, the candidate he did not endorse, Jill Stein, is definitely facing headwinds. And I was very disappointed to see this. I think folks know I have talked about this. I went up to New York State a few weeks ago, weekend of the 21st, I believe. And I was in Queens. I was in Westchester County trying to get signatures to put Jill Stein on the ballot in New York. And obviously I didn't succeed. I mean, myself and others together, we were not able to get her on the ballot. And it's very upsetting, very disappointing. It would have been really nice to see. New York State has made it incredibly difficult for alternative parties. Jill Stein didn't make it. So maybe Kyle Kulinski's I guess he'll write her in because he said he was going to vote for her, and he's in New York State, as I understand it. This segment isn't really about Kyle Kulinski. This segment is really about right now how problematic, how difficult, or let me say this, how wrong Cornel West was not to run as a Green. He just, I mean, it just, the harm he did to the progressive movement, and I don't want to, the harm he did to our country is very, very significant. We know what, the worst, the most awful things that this country and this world are facing: endless war, genocide, full-blown nuclear conflict in Europe arising out of Ukraine. These are all the fruits of our duopoly. People don't like it. People are against it. There was an opportunity in 23, 24. There's been an opportunity to perhaps break free of that two-party cage that we find ourselves in. Cornel West, well-known, progressive, African-American, had announced a year ago that he was going to run for president, and he relatively shortly thereafter said he was going to run on the Green Party or run for the Green Party nomination. I thought this was really big news. He's not going to be on the ballot in New York State. Other third-party candidates were rejected. Only in New York will be Biden, Trump, and crazy Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy is not somebody I have any respect for. Would never urge you to vote for him. He's as in for the Israeli genocide as Biden or Trump. Yeah, he said some good things about getting out of Ukraine. So has Trump. But he takes the anti-vaxxer stuff way, way, way too far. There's reason to be skeptical of, obviously, Big Pharma. But RFK Jr. is a terrible choice, terrible option. There's no good options on the ballot in New York State. There could have been, possibly. I'm not saying it would have been. I told you it's really hard to get on the ballot in New York State. But there might have been a shot for the Green Party if Cornel West had run as a Green. And I say that because it was very, very tough. You had to get 45,000 signatures to get on the ballot in New York State. That was the in like 8 weeks. You had a very, very short window. And Jill Stein just didn't really excite people, to be perfectly honest. And I can say that because I was out there collecting signatures. She's run for president before. A lot of people just really don't. Maybe some haven't heard of her. Those who have, a lot don't think much of her. Cornel West has some real strong support within the Black community. 45,000 New Yorkers. So New York State has 20 million people. I'm going to guess there's about 9 million registered voters in New York State. So 45,000 would be 0.5%. If I did my math right, maybe I did 90,900. Yeah, so you had to get 0.5% of registered voters to sign, I believe. Dr. West has some real solid support in the African American community. This is from 5 days ago, USA Today Blacks Only poll. West at 8% and West at 6%. That's pretty good. That's a pretty decent percentage. If he had been on the Green Party ballot, there would have been a real chance, I believe, to get African American community leaders, African American voters on board the West train, the Green Party train. He didn't want to do it. He didn't do it. The only main concern I think he raised about the Green Party was they didn't center. He had said, hey, you don't see a lot of black people there. They're mostly white activists. I think that's probably true, although Ajamu Baraka ran as Jill Stein's vice president twice, and he's black. But okay, but this was an opportunity where you could have been building, Dr. West, a multiracial working class coalition, which is what we need to topple the duopoly. You could have been part of that. Instead, you took your ball and went home. And what were your reasons? Well, you said you didn't see a lot of black faces. Well, try to bring them in. You said the Green Party doesn't center empire, white supremacy and empire. I can tell you that's not true. I've been to a number of Green Party meetings. I think they talk too much about identity politics. And they talk too much about white privilege and white supremacy when there are plenty of white people in this country who are struggling. To me, that message is a little bit divisive. It's a lot of bit divisive because working class white people, when they hear white supremacy, when they hear white privilege, they say, well, wait, I'm not privileged. I'm not supreme. What are you going to take away from me? So I'm not fully on board that message from the Green Party, a message which apparently mirrors your own. So I don't get what it is you didn't like about the Green Party, Dr. West. But you said, I'm not going to run as a Green. So your support in the African American community was largely, was never realized by the Green Party. There was no unification. There was no coalition building. And what did you get out of it? I mean, I would say, if you want to be a free agent, if you want to run by yourself, that's great if you can make it work. But did you? Have you? This is from the West campaign. These are the states where they're on the ballot. So they're not in New York, it's orange. The reds are the states where they're actually on the ballot. These are small states, right? No big states. None. New York, they're not on the ballot. You got Vermont, you got North Carolina, South Carolina. Those are medium-sized states for sure. Colorado, medium-sized state. Utah, relatively small state. Oregon, small to medium-sized. Alaska, very small. That's it. You don't have the big enchilada. You don't have Texas. You don't have Florida. You don't have New York. You have Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. This was an opportunity that you squandered, Dr. West. And you squandered for yourself. Because if you had run as a Green, you would be on in some of those states for certain, because the Green Party's on 3 of those 4 big states. California, Texas, Florida. Didn't make New York. I think with your support, if you had been in the party, if you had been the likely nominee, you could have rallied people to register as Green, to petition to allow the Green Party on the ballot. You didn't do that. And look at some of those other states which you aren't going to be on the ballot in. Michigan, Arizona, Colorado, maybe Georgia. I don't know. We'll see. It's really hard to overstate what a missed opportunity this was. Because Dr. West, just for what no coherent reason that I've seen, just said, I'm not going to run as a Green. You don't like to talk about this because it's just wringing our hands. It's just fretting. But we don't have a lot of time to screw things up. We've already done it so much. It's really, really, really disappointing what happened there. All right, what do I have? I have 2 o'clock. Have I been going for a full hour? I wonder. I'm gonna look and see if I have. I may beg off. I got a couple more stories I wanted to think I was gonna try to get to, but what are they? 37? Why do I don't even know. Not quite an hour. All right. When did I start? I guess I started after 1. I started that late. I thought I had started a little before 1, but I guess not. Okay, so real quick, just to let people know where I'm going, I hope you're not going to be envious. I certainly envy is a powerful emotion, which I understand. And one of the big reasons that I am such a proponent of my little mantra there, everyone has enough, no one has too much, is because I don't want people to be so envious. It doesn't feel good to think, oh, that person has so much more than I do, and it's not fair, it's not right. I get it. I'm really lucky. There's nothing I can do about that. I mean, I guess I do what I can. I try to make the world a better place. But what I really want to do is reduce greatly wealth and economic inequality and income inequality. So we'll have enough and no one has too much. I'm very, very fortunate. I have an opportunity. I'm going to go to Germany Monday to see the World Cup with my son. Really looking forward to it. One of the reasons that, or it's not the World Cup, it's the Euro Cup. I get it. It's not the World Cup. One of the reasons I really thought about doing this is my son has been saying, let's go, let's go, let's go. And I thought, I lost my dad when I was 50, when he was 58. I was 25, I think. And I'm in really good health, so I'd probably be around for a long time. But but memories I have of my dad were when I did things with him. Baseball games, sporting activities, skiing trips. Those are really cherished for me. And I thought, I might have another 30 plus years, hopefully. My son might have another 50, 60, 70 plus years, maybe. He's in his 20s. He could certainly live to be into his mid 90s. So I want him to have those memories, right? Not so much because it's of me, but I just want him to be, have a life where he can think about things that he did that made him happy throughout his life. And so I was like, okay, yeah, let's go watch the soccer. Let's go over to Germany. So I saw this story I just wanted to talk about briefly. There are these jackasses, and we're rooting for England. England had a rough game yesterday. They were lucky to eke out a tie. They didn't deserve it. They'll probably make it to the round of 16 if you follow soccer. But the English fans, they're sort of this hooligan base, and these guys don't even look like hooligans. They just look like jerk-offs. They look like jokers or whatever word you want. They're embarrassment. They're holding their blow-up Spitfires like they were pilots during World War II or something, fighting against the Germans. But they do sing this song, 10 German Bombers, which the Germans apparently find very offensive. And, I said to my son, you're not singing that. I will not be part there. Apparently there was threats that if English fans sing this, the police are going to arrest them. Apparently those threats were not carried out because there have been a few events, outside. They have these giant open air plazas where people are watching the football on enormous screens. And some of the English fans are singing that song. And basically the song is, there are 10 German bombers in the air. It's a drinking song. There are 10 German bombers in the air, there are 10 German bombers in the air. And then the next verse is there are 9 German bombers in the air. And it ends with there are no German bombers in the air because the RAF, the Royal Air Force from England, the RAF from England, the RAF from England shot him down. So obviously it's celebrating the Battle of Britain, the defeat of the Luftwaffe that was there, the German Nazi Hitler Air Force that was bombing civilians, much like Israel bombing civilians in Gaza. The Germans were doing that during the Blitz in London and other cities in England and trying to just completely annihilate them. And so the English song harkens back to the glorious RAF that, the few that Churchill talked about who were owed so much by the English people, the British people. I get the song. I can also get why the Germans don't want it sung. I thought the response by The Athletic, which is the New York Times sports section now, they don't have their own, or they kind of incorporated into the New York Times, they call it The Athletic. And they're so politically correct, and they're so committed to DEI and all that, that they've got to, in a case where it makes absolutely zero sense, criticize these obviously jingoistic English fans who really aren't, I mean, come on, the war's over 80 plus years ago. You're really going to be singing that like that's some sort of a victory chant? It's absurd. But the Times trying to make fun of them, the English fans, they're not even hooligans. They're just some drunken louts. The Times, in this absurd editorializing, calls the 10 German bombers chant a mock of German casualties in the Second World War. They're mocking, they're singing about the victory over an invading air force that was trying to soften up the island, which was in fact a democracy. There was still freedom. They weren't run by genocidal maniacs bound and determined to kill everyone who was part of a particular ethnic group. And I know there's what happened in India was awful, and we can talk about that as well. But the English were defending their island against the German Nazi invaders. To say that celebrating or mocking German casualties really is a perversion of language. Yes, when you shoot down a German bomber that is considered, or Nazi bomber that is considered a German casualty. But can we not be honest about history and say we're glad that the RAF ultimately was able to prevail and keep the skies from complete German domination in the spring of 1940? Are we really going to make the argument in the New York Times because we want to condemn some, rude, disrespectful English people? We're going to really make the argument, New York Times, that song mocks German casualties rather than celebrates a win over fascism? I mean, this is what our media is. This is why people really, I think, look down, laugh, really often laugh at media, because they take such absurd, totally indefensible positions that are completely contrary to the way most Americans feel on many issues. And you see this in sports a lot. You see this when it comes to the WNBA, where the newspapers champion the cause of salary equity and much higher pay for women's athletes, who are actually pretty well paid. I mean, they're paid better than most Americans. I think the minimum salary in the WNBA is well over $100,000. I mean, it pales compared to the NBA because the men are so grossly, exorbitantly compensated because it's a very popular sport. It's worldwide, and there aren't a lot of players in the NBA. But to argue that, people are like, but the WNBA loses money, a lot of money. The NBA funds the WNBA. And I think most sports watchers get that. They're not big fans. It's not as popular. People don't want to watch, in general, the WNBA. It doesn't receive the same eyeballs. And media can't wrap itself around that fact. So they champion like equity. Well, they're both playing basketball. Why aren't the women getting paid a lot more money, rather than they both play basketball, but they're different kinds of basketball, and the women's game is losing money, and it's being propped up by the NBA. which is the real story. But media doesn't want to get that because they're promoting an identity politics, identity-centric, whether the identity is gender, whether the identity is race, whether the identity is sex. That's what they, or nation of origin, as in the 10 German bombers chant. Well, we like Germany now because they're the host country, they're trying to run a really nice event, keep everyone happy, and we don't like the English. So we're going to come up with some absurd claim that German bombers is celebrating German casualties and mocking them rather than celebrating a victory over fascism. So you see the media just misses the story so completely. You'll also see that when it comes to trans issues, for example. And I want to be real clear about this. I totally support trans rights. But when it comes to trans people in sports, the great majority of Americans don't believe that trans women and girls should be competing against males, boys, and men. But that position is almost completely not found in corporate media. I'm not talking about, if you look in chat rooms, if you look in comment sections, you'll see most people will say, no, they're different. There's a physiological difference. But you won't find that in media. You won't find that position prominent in media. And the reason, I believe, more than any other, is because they are happy to divide us along race, gender, sex lines. What they don't want us to do is unite along class lines. So my solution to these problems, for example, it is unfair. It really is. I mean, I do think the NBA it's a different game. It's more exciting. They're more athletic. It's more popular by an order of magnitude versus the WNBA. Even so, the women work really hard. They're at the top of their game. And you have a very short athletic career. Sure, you make a good living for a few years, but then you may not make anything. And you've sacrificed an opportunity to make more money in another, lifetime. So my solution is not to force the WNBA to pay their workers more, not to force the NBA to subsidize the WNBA to an even greater extent. My solution is we all have enough. No one has too much. Everyone in the WNBA will have health care from the moment they're born till they die. They're all going to be guaranteed a place to live. And the same for the men in the NBA, but they're not going to have so much, right? You start seeing salaries of 10 million, 20 million, 40. I think Luka Doncic is on par to get somewhere like 40, 50 million a year. Okay, fine. Pay him that much. But through taxation, most people will all benefit. Because 90%, 95% of that over the first 10 million is going to come back to the government, maybe 90% after the first 1 million. And you know what? If Luka doesn't like it because he's like, yeah, but I can only play basketball for 15 years and then I got to retire and I won't be. Okay, but guess what, Luka? You're going to have health care for your entire life. You're going to have, even with a paltry, take home of a few million annually, he'll still be fine. But we can tweak the tax code so you can defer income when you have a career like that as an entertainer that's more short-lived. So we can address these problems. But that's how ultimately you tamp down envy, you tamp down resentments, you tamp down injustices. Everyone, doesn't matter who you are. Period. End of story. You can be a bad person. You can be a criminal. You're still going to have enough. That's what we have to do. That's where we have to get. And if you have any ideas how to get there, let me know. But you can let me know in a week or so because I'll be away. Have a great afternoon, weekend, and week.